I thought my wife might be preparing to divorce me, so I quietly relocated my assets. Just 2 weeks after that, she officially filed for divorce, but then quickly withdrew it when her strategy fell apart. Before diving into today's story, I could really use your support. We've been seeing a drop in channel engagement lately, and hitting that subscribe button is one of the simplest, free ways to help us out. It takes just a second and ensures we can keep delivering quality content. Your backing means the world. Let's grow this community together. Thanks so much. Now on to the story. Hey everyone, I've been quietly reading posts in this community for quite some time, convinced I'd never have a personal experience to share. But life loves to throw curveballs, and I've been carrying this burden for months now. I finally need to get it off my chest. To be upfront, I've never been someone who leaps to wild assumptions or imagines the worst-case scenario. My wife, let's call her M, and I had been a couple for 6 years and married for 4. Everything seemed stable, at least from my perspective. We went through the usual highs and lows, but nothing ever signaled a major crisis. In fact, for most of our time together, we were that enviable pair who operated like true partners. We shared ridiculous private jokes, debated endlessly over movie choices, and had a rhythm that simply clicked. She'd plan thoughtful romantic evenings, and I'd surprise her with her go-to takeout after a tough day. It all felt natural, like we'd cracked the code on lasting love. That's exactly why what happened next hit me so hard. The change started about 6 months ago, and it crept in gradually. Initially, it was small things, details you'd probably overlook unless you were really tuned in. She started taking her phone with her everywhere, even for quick trips to the kitchen or while doing laundry. Previously, her phone could sit untouched on the coffee table for hours, and she never cared if anyone glanced at it. One day, I teased her about it. "What? Are you secretly running an intelligence operation now?" She laughed it off, saying work had been sending her tons of emails. Fair enough. But a few days later, she suddenly added a passcode. That one genuinely surprised me because she'd never bothered with one before. When I asked lightly why the change, she gave a vague answer about online security and potential hackers. I let it slide, not wanting to seem overly suspicious, but it just felt strange. And it didn't stop there. She began stepping out of the room to take calls, something she'd never done in the past. It wasn't discreet either. Her phone would buzz, and she'd say, "Hang on, I need to take this quickly," before heading to the bedroom or out onto the patio. If I asked who was calling, she'd brush it off with, "Oh, just a colleague from work." Then came another new pattern, always placing her phone screen down on surfaces. I didn't even realize that was a red flag until I reached across to hand her something and she instinctively snatched her phone away. It was a split-second reaction, but it lingered in my mind. The emotional gap widened too. It wasn't limited to the phone habits. She grew remote. Talks that once flowed naturally now felt forced and awkward. When I'd mention future ideas, like where to celebrate our upcoming anniversary, or whether we should start setting aside money for a newer vehicle, she'd just murmur, "Yeah, maybe," and quickly change topics. Everything crystallized for me one afternoon. She had mentioned meeting a girlfriend for coffee. I happened to be out running errands nearby, so I thought, why not pop in and surprise her? Could be sweet. But when I got there, she wasn't inside with her friend. She was pacing outside the cafe, phone pressed to her ear. I stayed in my car because her body language looked intense. I hadn't planned to listen in, but fragments drifted over. Phrases like, "It's nearly set," and "a new beginning very soon." My heart dropped. I couldn't place the context, but it didn't sound like casual work chatter or friend drama. It felt bigger, like a calculated plan. When she got home, I asked casually how the coffee meetup went. She launched into a detailed story about her friend venting over boyfriend issues. Felt so fabricated that I just stared for a moment. Soon after, she casually suggested we consolidate all our financial information. "What do you think about putting everything together?" she asked one evening. "Like a shared folder for accounts, passwords, important documents, that sort of thing. Just for safety." I was caught off guard. We'd never talked about formalizing things like that before, and the timing felt odd with all the other shifts I'd noticed. "What kind of safety?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. She shrugged. In case of an emergency, or if we ever need to handle something financial fast. On paper, it sounded reasonable, but her delivery felt scripted, like she'd rehearsed the pitch. I agreed vaguely, sure, that makes sense. But inside, warning bells were blaring. Why the sudden focus on organizing money when we'd always kept things relaxed and mostly separate? That night, I replayed her words over and over, trying to decode them. Was I overanalyzing normal adult planning? But paired with the secret of calls, the overheard cafe conversation, and her growing detachment, it was adding up to an unsettling picture. Up to that point, I'd stayed passive. A few days later, she circled back to it. We were in the kitchen. I was fixing a quick bite. She was scrolling on her phone. When she said, "Have you given any more thought to sorting the banking details? Like knowing where everything is kept?" I paused, turned to her, and asked directly but calmly, "Hey, what's really going on? You've mentioned finances a few times recently. Is there something we should discuss?" She looked up, clearly surprised I'd pushed back. "Nothing's wrong," she said quickly, almost defensively. "I just think it's practical, for unexpected situations." "Unexpected situations like what?" She shrugged, expression guarded. "I don't know, life happens. It's no big deal, I swear. Just something responsible couples do." Her answers felt evasive, too nonspecific. I nodded and dropped it, but her reluctance to give straight responses only fueled my unease. It no longer seemed like an innocent suggestion. It felt like she was hiding an agenda, though I couldn't pinpoint what. So the following day, while she was at work, I logged into our shared accounts to review things myself. What I found was eye-opening. In the past month, there had been several small transfers. Nothing huge, but unexplained amounts that didn't match regular expenses like utilities, shopping, or subscriptions. I hesitated to confront her, unsure if I'd misread it. Accusing wrongly would make me look foolish. But if my instincts were right, I needed to proceed cautiously. The uncertainty was gnawing at me, so I reached out to a trusted college buddy who practices law. I laid out everything, trying not to sound unhinged. "Listen," he said after hearing me out. "I'm not confirming anything shady, but you're smart to prepare. If you're worried about safeguarding what you've built, act now. Better protected than regretting later." He outlined straightforward, legal steps to shield my finances if needed. Admitting I might need such measures felt surreal. It was like bracing for disaster without proof something was even brewing. Yet the pieces were aligning in a way I couldn't ignore. If she truly had ulterior motives, and suspicion was growing, I had to protect myself. It wasn't a simple choice, though. This went beyond money or property. It was about the shared life we'd built. Memories kept flashing. Our wedding vows, midnight talks about future goals, the silly quirks only we understood. How had we reached this point? Taking protective steps felt like surrendering the foundation of trust we'd relied on. That night, while she was out, I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and started reviewing everything: bank statements, investment portfolios, the house title. My hands trembled as I worked through each document. Every click felt like a small betrayal, yet a voice insisted this was self-preservation, not attack. I wasn't trying to harm her. The fear of future regret outweighed everything else. I made a detailed plan of what could be moved discreetly. As I organized, a heavy sadness pressed down. I'd placed complete faith in her for years, and now I was forced into defensive mode against my own partner. Then I phoned my mom, explaining vaguely that I needed her assistance. "Can you hold some important items for me temporarily? It's precautionary, nothing illegal. Just protecting myself in case." She went quiet, clearly sensing the unspoken worry. "Are you all right?" Her tone full of concern. "I'm fine," I fibbed. "Really, just being careful." She didn't probe further, though I heard the hesitation. "Of course, honey. Anything you need." Ending the call left me with a wave of guilt for involving her, but her support anchored me amid the turmoil. By the time Em returned, I'd initiated the transfers. I shifted most assets, cash, investments, even the house title, into my mother's name. I left enough in our joint account to avoid immediate flags, but the bulk was secured. She didn't detect anything. She came in, gave me a quick peck, and asked if I felt like a movie night. Outwardly I acted normal, but internally I was unraveling. One side felt guilty for undermining her trust. The other felt a strange relief at regaining some control in a situation slipping away. For the next few days I maintained the facade. I didn't want to tip her off. She seemed content, even unusually upbeat at times. Rather than reassuring me, it heightened my wariness. If she had a scheme, she was masking it masterfully. Notably, she never revisited the finance topic, not once after I'd questioned her. It was as though the idea had vanished. At first I wondered if I'd imagined the urgency, and she'd let it go because it wasn't critical. But on reflection, it seemed intentional avoidance, like she feared reopening the conversation after my pushback. I caught her glancing at me occasionally, as if gauging my reaction or debating whether to speak. Each time, she'd swiftly look away, to her phone, the screen, a magazine. It was subtle but noticeable. It felt like she was waiting for me to reintroduce it, unwilling to risk pressing further. If she was probing, she wasn't committing. If she was biding time, I refused to play along. Whatever came next, I intended to stay ahead. Something was brewing. I just didn't know the timeline or form. Preparation was my only option. That evening, I reviewed everything once more. I confirmed the transfers to my mother were ironclad, placed in an irrevocable trust. The house, savings, investments, all legally hers now. I even rang her to verify receipt of all documentation. 2 weeks went by and surface-level normalcy returned, almost too normal. She grew more affectionate, even initiating chats about work or dinner plans. Confused me because she'd been withdrawn for months, limiting interactions to basics. Part of me started doubting my own judgment. Maybe the odd behavior stemmed from stress I hadn't grasped. But then, on an ordinary Friday evening, she asked me to sit, muted the TV, and said, "We need to have a serious conversation." My gut twisted instantly. I knew what was coming. "I believe we should divorce," she stated, tone eerily composed. No anger, no tears, just flat, like announcing minor news. I stared, processing, as she listed reasons. She talked about needing independence, rediscovering herself, feeling she'd lost who she was in the relationship. Classic lines that explained little. Then she shifted. "You know, I've given up so much for you over the years, and I don't feel you truly value that. I deserve better." That stung deeply. It wasn't merely wanting out. She was positioning it as entitlement, framing me as the villain who owed her compensation. As I absorbed her words, a new question emerged. Why this exact moment? Then she added something revealing. "A close friend has really helped me gain perspective," she said, avoiding eye contact. A close friend. I stayed quiet, letting her continue, but my thoughts raced. Who was this person? Why such heavy influence on our marriage? Her phrasing wasn't offhand. It sounded like someone had been coaching her, building her case that leaving wasn't optional but necessary, and strategically timed. And her emphasis on deserving more for sacrifices rang hollow. Sacrifices? We'd both compromised. I'd relocated for her career convenience, extending my own commute. I'd funded her luxury wellness getaway last year, skipping my planned trip. I'd supported her through 2 job switches, encouraging the leaps because her happiness mattered. I wasn't a neglectful spouse. I showed up for milestones, remembered small preferences, planned outings when she felt stuck. I listened to her frustrations about everything from work to family. I wasn't perfect, but I invested effort. That's why her "I deserve better" claim felt manipulative. She wasn't unhappy because of my shortcomings. Something external had shifted her mindset. Perhaps this friend, or another factor. But the woman before me wasn't the one I'd married, and I refused to let her rewrite history to justify her exit. I didn't challenge her then. Instead, I replied neutrally, "If that's what you want, we should discuss logistics." She looked taken aback that I didn't fight or plead, but I was already pivoting. My focus turned to uncovering the real influence behind her abrupt, orchestrated change. This wasn't a spontaneous epiphany. Something or someone else was driving it, and I wouldn't be blindsided further. After the talk, she retreated to the guest room, and the divorce papers arrived Monday. They weren't modest. They demanded half the house, my entire savings, investments, the vehicle, essentially everything, plus vague alimony terms that didn't align with her strong income. It was clear she expected a massive payout for years of my effort. Initially, I chalked it up to bitterness, but the precise, aggressive claims suggested professional guidance. So I investigated. Directly asking about her advisors wasn't viable, so I got creative. I started with her online presence. She hadn't restricted access, and though she posted sparingly, I examined tags and interactions for new faces. That's where the pattern emerged. A guy named Jake consistently liked and commented on her updates. Nothing overt, but frequent enough to notice. I visited his open profile. On surface, just a typical 30-something in marketing. But scrolling deeper, I found coincidences. A photo from the exact cafe on the day I'd seen her pacing outside, talking about a fresh start. My stomach turned as I dug further. More hints. A supportive comment like, "You're strong enough for this," on one of her posts, plus a selfie seemingly taken at her workplace. Nothing conclusive, but collectively damning. Her mention of a perspective-giving friend echoed, and I needed confirmation. I reached out to a mutual friend, Lisa, who'd known my wife for years. I kept it casual at first. Had she talked to him lately? Noticed anything off? Lisa replied fast, claiming ignorance about any advisor or issues. My follow-ups grew pointed, but she shut down, saying she couldn't get involved. Frustrated, I tried another friend, Emily. Same cautious approach, just trying to understand the sudden shift. She was evasive initially, giving non-answers. When I persisted gently, she abruptly ended the call, deepening my doubts. Then, surprisingly, Emily rang back. She wanted assurance her name stayed out of it. I promised, and after hesitation, she spilled. My wife had been spending significant time with Jake from work. Emily didn't have full details, but Jake had apparently been heavily involved in shaping the divorce strategy my wife was following. Hearing the name clicked everything into place. This wasn't solely about space or self-discovery. Another person was embedded, steering her choices, and I was determined to understand the full motive.